He was a respected pediatrician, a pillar of the community, a devoted family man. But Dr. Richard Hartwell was living two completely separate lives. For 15 years, this beloved doctor maintained two families, two wives, two sets of children, two homes, just 40 miles apart. Nobody knew, not his colleagues, not his friends, not even his own children, until one chance encounter at a hospital brought his entire world crashing down. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just destroy two families. It led to a murder that shocked the entire state of North Carolina. This is the true story of deception, betrayal, and the ultimate price of living a lie. Before we dive into this unbelievable case, make sure you hit that subscribe button and comment down below what state you're watching from. We're building the biggest true crime community here at American Shadow, and we want to hear from you. Now, let's expose the double life of Dr. Richard Hartwell. Chapel Hill, North Carolina, home of the University of North Carolina, a progressive college town, beautiful, educated, safe. Dr. Richard Hartwell was one of the most respected pediatricians in the area, 47 years old, tall, distinguished, salt and pepper hair, the kind of doctor parents requested by name. Kids loved him. He had a gentle manner. He made children feel safe. Dr. Hartwell had been practicing medicine for 20 years. He'd delivered thousands of babies, treated thousands of sick children, saved countless lives. He was married to Elizabeth Hartwell. They'd been together since medical school. 23 years of marriage. Elizabeth was a nurse. They'd met during Richard's residency at Duke University Hospital. Together, they had 3 children: Sarah, 19, Michael, 17, and Emma, 14. The Hartwells lived in a beautiful 2-story brick home in a quiet neighborhood, 2-car garage, swimming pool in the back. The American dream. Every Sunday, the family went to church together. Every Christmas, they volunteered at the local food bank. Every summer, they took a family vacation to the Outer Banks. Dr. Richard Hartwell seemed to have it all, but he wanted more. And so, 15 years earlier, he'd started building a second life. 40 miles away, in the town of Burlington, North Carolina, Dr. Richard Hartwell had another home, another wife, another family. Her name was Jessica Monroe, 38 years old, 9 years younger than Richard. Beautiful, brunette, a dental hygienist. Jessica thought she was married to Richard Hartwell. She had a marriage certificate to prove it. Or what she thought was a legitimate marriage certificate. They'd met in 2008. Richard had come into the dental office where Jessica worked. He was charming, attentive. He asked her out for coffee. Richard told Jessica he was a pediatrician, that he'd recently moved to North Carolina from Virginia, that he was divorced, no kids, starting fresh, all lies. But Jessica believed him. Why wouldn't she? Richard was convincing. He had all the details worked out. They dated for 6 months. Then Richard proposed. They had a small wedding ceremony, just 20 guests, at a bed and breakfast in the mountains. The marriage wasn't legal, of course. Richard was already married to Elizabeth. But Jessica didn't know that. She thought she was Mrs. Richard Hartwell. Together, Richard and Jessica had 2 children, a son, Jacob, who was now 13, and a daughter, Lily, who was 10. Richard bought a house for Jessica and the kids in Burlington, a nice 3-bedroom ranch, nothing too flashy. He paid for everything: mortgage, car payments, groceries, school expenses. Jessica thought Richard was an amazing husband and father. Sure, he traveled a lot for work. He said he consulted at different hospitals across the state, that he had to be away several nights a week. But when he was home, he was present, attentive, loving. Jessica had no idea that on the nights Richard wasn't with her, he was 40 miles away, with his real wife, his real family, For 15 years, Dr. Richard Hartwell juggled 2 complete lives. How did he do it? How did he keep it all straight? That's what makes this case so fascinating and so terrifying. Dr. Richard Hartwell was meticulous. He had 2 cell phones, one for Elizabeth, one for Jessica. He kept them in separate pockets, never mixed them up. He had 2 sets of clothes, 2 sets of toiletries. Everything was organized, everything was planned. His schedule was carefully coordinated. He told Elizabeth he worked long hours at the hospital, night shifts, weekend shifts, medical conferences out of town. He told Jessica the same thing, always working, always busy, always traveling for consultations. Neither woman questioned it. Richard was a doctor. Doctors work crazy hours. That's just how it is. Financially, Richard made it work. He was a successful pediatrician. He made over $300,000 a year. He told Elizabeth they needed to be frugal, save for the kids' college funds. She believed him. Meanwhile, he was supporting an entire second household. He had 2 separate bank accounts, 2 credit cards, everything kept separate. Elizabeth never saw the statements for Jessica's expenses. Jessica never saw the statements for Elizabeth's expenses. Richard told elaborate lies. If Elizabeth wanted to visit him at work, he'd say he was at a satellite clinic that day. If Jessica wanted to surprise him with lunch, he'd say he was in surgery, unreachable. Family vacations were carefully scheduled. He'd take Elizabeth and the kids to the beach in July. He'd take Jessica and the kids to the mountains in August. Holidays were split. Thanksgiving with one family, Christmas with the other. He'd rotate each year. Always had an excuse. I have to work. I'm on call. There's an emergency. For 15 years, this went on. 15 years of lies, of deception, of living 2 completely separate lives. How did he keep it all straight? How did he not slip up? The truth is, he almost did. Many times. But Richard Hartwell was smart. He was careful. He was a master manipulator. Until he got careless. Just once. And that one mistake unraveled everything. March 14th, 2023. Elizabeth Hartwell's mother had a heart attack. She was rushed to UNC Hospital in Chapel Hill. Elizabeth called Richard immediately. He needed to come. Right away. But Richard was in Burlington, with Jessica and the kids. He made an excuse to Jessica. Emergency at the hospital. Critical patient, I have to go. Jessica understood. She always understood. Richard drove to Chapel Hill, met Elizabeth at the hospital. Her mother was stable. The doctors said she'd recover, but she needed to stay for observation. Elizabeth wanted to stay at the hospital all night. Richard said he'd stay with her. They settled into the waiting room on the cardiac floor. Around midnight, Richard went to get coffee from the cafeteria. That's when he saw her. Jessica. She was walking down the hallway, in scrubs. She worked per diem shifts at UNC Hospital sometimes. Extra money. Richard knew this, but he'd always been careful to avoid her. Tonight, he wasn't careful enough. Jessica saw Richard. Her face lit up. "Richard, what are you doing here?" Richard froze. His mind raced. What could he say? How could he explain? But before he could answer, Elizabeth appeared. She'd been looking for Richard, wondering what was taking so long. "Richard? Who's this?" Elizabeth asked. Jessica looked confused. "I'm Jessica, Richard's wife." Silence. Elizabeth's face went pale. "What did you just say?" Jessica looked between Richard and Elizabeth. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Richard, who is this woman?" Jessica asked. Richard tried to speak, but no words came out. Elizabeth's voice was shaking. "Richard, tell me right now, who is she?" And that's when everything fell apart. In that hospital hallway, Dr. Richard Hartwell's 15-year lie ended. Jessica started crying. "Richard, what's going on? Why is this woman asking who I am?" Elizabeth was in shock. You said you're his wife? That's impossible. I'm his wife. We've been married for 23 years. Jessica shook her head. No, that can't be. We've been married for 15 years. We have 2 kids together. Elizabeth felt like she was going to pass out. 2 kids? What are you talking about? Richard finally spoke. Elizabeth. Jessica, please, let me explain. But there was no explanation that could fix this. No lie that could cover this up. Hospital security was called. The commotion had drawn attention. Nurses, doctors, patients. Elizabeth demanded answers. Right there, in front of everyone. Richard broke down. He admitted everything. The double life, the 2 families, the 15 years of deception. Jessica collapsed, literally fell to the floor. Nurses had to help her. She was hyperventilating, having a panic attack. Elizabeth was screaming, crying. Security had to restrain her. She wanted to attack Richard. It was chaos, complete and utter chaos. Richard was escorted out of the hospital. Elizabeth refused to go home with him. She called her sister, got a ride. Jessica was sedated, kept overnight for observation. The shock was too much. And Dr. Richard Hartwell? He drove home, to the house in Chapel Hill, the house he shared with Elizabeth and their 3 kids. But when he got there, Elizabeth had already told the children. Sarah, Michael, Emma. They wanted nothing to do with him. Richard spent that night alone, in a hotel, his entire life, destroyed, in a single moment. But the nightmare was just beginning. The next day, the truth spread like wildfire. In Chapel Hill, Elizabeth told everyone, her friends, her family, Richard's colleagues at the hospital. In Burlington, Jessica told everyone, her friends, her family, her co-workers. Dr. Richard Hartwell became infamous overnight. Local news picked up the story. Respected pediatrician led double life for 15 years. The medical board launched an investigation. Richard's hospital privileges were immediately suspended. He was placed on administrative leave. Parents pulled their kids from his practice. How could they trust a man who'd lied to everyone for 15 years? But the legal fallout was even worse. Elizabeth filed for divorce. Immediately. She wanted everything. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts, all of it. Jessica discovered her marriage to Richard wasn't even legal. She'd been living a lie for 15 years. She and her children had no legal claim to anything. Richard had committed bigamy, or attempted bigamy. Either way, it was a crime. Jessica filed a civil lawsuit, fraud, emotional distress. She wanted Richard to pay for what he'd done to her and her children. The 2 families were both destroyed, both financially, both emotionally. Sarah, Richard and Elizabeth's oldest daughter, attempted suicide. She couldn't handle the shame, the embarrassment, the betrayal. She survived, but barely. Jacob, Richard and Jessica's son, started acting out at school, fighting, skipping classes. His grades plummeted. The children on both sides were traumatized. Their entire lives had been built on a lie. And Richard? He was drowning, financially, emotionally, legally. He'd lost his medical license, his reputation, his family's, everything. But then, something even darker happened. Jessica Monroe started receiving threats. April 2023. Jessica Monroe was trying to rebuild her life. She was seeing a therapist, trying to help her kids process the trauma, figuring out how to survive financially without Richard's support. And then, the letters started arriving. The first one came in the mail. No return address, plain white envelope. Inside, a single typed message. You destroyed my family, you'll pay for this. Jessica was terrified. She called the police. They took a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do. No direct threat of violence. A week later, another letter. You're a homewrecker. You deserve to suffer. Then another. I know where you live. I know where your kids go to school." Jessica was panicking. She installed security cameras, changed her locks, started looking over her shoulder everywhere she went. She assumed the letters were from Elizabeth, or maybe one of Elizabeth's friends, someone who blamed Jessica for the affair, even though Jessica hadn't known Richard was married. Jessica tried to contact Elizabeth, to explain, to apologize, but Elizabeth wouldn't take her calls. The threats escalated. Someone slashed Jessica's tires, spray-painted "home wrecker" on her garage door. Jessica went to the police again. She showed them the letters, the vandalism. She begged for help. The police opened an investigation. They questioned Elizabeth. She denied everything, said she'd never contacted Jessica, never threatened her. And then, on May 2nd, 2023, Jessica Monroe was attacked. May 2nd, 7 p.m. Jessica was leaving the grocery store. It was getting dark. The parking lot was nearly empty. As she loaded groceries into her car, someone approached from behind. A figure in dark clothing, hood up, face covered. The attacker hit Jessica in the back of the head with something heavy, a tire iron, or a pipe, something metal. Jessica fell to the ground. The attacker hit her again, and again. A witness in the parking lot heard Jessica screaming, called 911, started running toward them. The attacker fled, dropped the weapon, ran into the nearby woods. When paramedics arrived, Jessica was unconscious, bleeding from multiple head wounds. She was rushed to the hospital, the same hospital where Richard worked, where everything had fallen apart just 6 weeks earlier. Jessica had a skull fracture, a brain bleed. She needed emergency surgery. She survived, but the injuries were severe. Permanent brain damage, partial paralysis on her left side. Her life was forever changed. The weapon was recovered from the parking lot, a metal pipe. Police collected fingerprints, DNA, security footage from the grocery store. Within 48 hours, they had a suspect, Sarah Hartwell, Richard and Elizabeth's 19-year-old daughter. Sarah Hartwell had snapped. She blamed Jessica Monroe for destroying her family, for her father's lies, for her mother's pain, for her own suicide attempt. In Sarah's mind, Jessica was the villain, the homewrecker, the woman who'd seduced her father and ruined everything. Never mind that Jessica hadn't known Richard was married. Never mind that Richard was the one who'd lied to both families. Sarah couldn't accept that her father was the bad guy. So, she made Jessica the bad guy instead. Sarah had been the one sending the threatening letters, vandalizing Jessica's property, and finally, attacking her in the parking lot. When police arrested Sarah, she confessed immediately. She showed no remorse. She deserved it, Sarah told police. She destroyed my family. She destroyed my life. Sarah was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, stalking, terroristic threats. She was 19 years old, looking at decades in prison. Elizabeth was devastated. Her daughter, her baby, now facing prison because of Richard's lies. Richard tried to visit Sarah in jail. She refused to see him. She blamed him too. Finally, Jessica recovered slowly, but she was never the same. The physical injuries, the emotional trauma, the fear, and her children, Jacob and Lily, had lost everything. Their father, their home, their sense of safety, and now, their mother was permanently disabled. Sarah Hartwell's trial began in October 2023. The prosecution argued that Sarah had attempted to murder Jessica Monroe, that she'd stalked her, terrorized her, and finally, tried to kill her. The defense argued that Sarah was mentally ill, that she'd suffered a psychological break after discovering her father's double life, that she wasn't in her right mind when she attacked Jessica. They brought in psychologists, testified about Sarah's fragile mental state, her suicide attempt, her depression, her inability to cope with the trauma. The jury heard testimony from Jessica. She was in a wheelchair now, still recovering. She described the attack, the fear, the pain, the lasting damage. They heard testimony from Elizabeth. She begged for mercy for her daughter, said Sarah was a victim too, a victim of Richard's lies. They heard testimony from Richard. He broke down on the stand, admitted everything was his fault, that he'd destroyed both families, that Sarah had been pushed to the breaking point. But the prosecution was clear. Sarah Hartwell had made choices. She'd chosen to stalk Jessica, to threaten her, to attack her, to try to kill her. Those choices had consequences. The jury deliberated for 3 days, November 7th, 2023. The jury found Sarah Hartwell guilty on all counts: attempted murder, aggravated assault, stalking. But they recommended leniency. They believed Sarah had been suffering from mental illness, that she deserved treatment, not just punishment. The judge sentenced Sarah to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. She was ordered to undergo intensive psychiatric treatment. In the courtroom, Elizabeth sobbed. Sarah showed no emotion. Jessica looked relieved. Justice had been served, but nobody felt like they'd won, because there were no winners in this case. 2 families destroyed, 1 woman permanently disabled, 1 young woman in prison, all because of one man's lies. Today, Dr. Richard Hartwell no longer practices medicine. His medical license was permanently revoked. He works as a medical consultant, makes a fraction of what he used to earn. He lives alone, in a small apartment. Both families have cut him out of their lives completely. Elizabeth divorced Richard. She got the house, most of the assets. She's rebuilding her life. She remarried in 2024. Sarah is currently serving her sentence at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. She'll be eligible for parole in 2031. Michael and Emma, Richard and Elizabeth's other 2 children, are in therapy, trying to process the trauma. They don't speak to their father. Jessica Monroe lives with her sister now. She can't work anymore. She's on disability. She still has nightmares about the attack. Jacob and Lily, Jessica's children, are being raised primarily by Jessica's family. Jessica's not able to care for them full-time anymore due to her injuries. The house in Burlington was foreclosed on. Richard couldn't keep up with the payments after losing his income. 2 families, both destroyed, all because one man wanted to live 2 lives. How does someone maintain a double life for 15 years? How is that even possible? Psychologists say people like Richard Hartwell often suffer from compartmentalization. They're able to separate different parts of their lives completely. It's almost like they become different people in different contexts. There's also narcissism, a belief that they're special, that normal rules don't apply to them, that they deserve to have it all. Richard Hartwell wanted the prestige of being a respected doctor, the stability of his marriage to Elizabeth, but he also wanted the excitement of a relationship with Jessica, the fresh start, the new family. He didn't want to choose. So, he didn't. He just had both. For 15 years, it worked. Until it didn't. The question many people ask, was Richard planning to maintain this double life forever? Or was he waiting for the right moment to come clean? We'll never know. Because Richard has never fully explained his motivations, his reasoning, his thought process. All we know is, his lies destroyed multiple lives and set off a chain of events that led to violence, to permanent disability, to a young woman going to prison. The ripple effects of Richard's deception will last for generations. The Richard Hartwell case raised interesting legal questions. Was Richard guilty of bigamy? Technically, no, because his marriage to Jessica wasn't legal. He never filed the paperwork. It was a fake ceremony, a fake certificate. But he did commit fraud. He took money under false pretenses. He lied to Jessica for 15 years, made her believe they were legally married. Jessica's civil lawsuit against Richard is still ongoing. She's seeking millions in damages for emotional distress, for fraud, for the life she'll never get back. But Richard doesn't have millions anymore. His assets were divided in the divorce. His income is a fraction of what it was. Jessica will probably never see significant compensation. Some legal experts have argued that Richard should face criminal charges, fraud, identity theft, something. But prosecutors decided there wasn't enough evidence to pursue criminal charges beyond the bigamy, which they couldn't prove because the marriage wasn't technically legal. It's a frustrating reality. Richard Hartwell destroyed lives, but legally, he didn't really break many laws. The real criminal, in the eyes of the law, was Sarah, the daughter who snapped, who tried to make someone pay for her father's sins. The Richard Hartwell case is a stark reminder of the cost of deception. Richard Hartwell was a respected doctor, a pillar of the community, a father, a husband, twice over. But he was also a liar, a manipulator, a man who thought he could have it all without consequences. For 15 years, he juggled 2 lives, 2 families, 2 sets of children who believed their father loved them. And when the truth came out, it destroyed everyone. Elizabeth, Jessica, Sarah, Michael, Emma, Jacob, Lily. 7 people whose lives were permanently altered by one man's lies. Jessica Monroe will never fully recover from her injuries. She'll spend the rest of her life dealing with the physical and emotional scars of Sarah's attack. Sarah Hartwell will spend her 20s and 30s in prison. Her future? Stolen. Because she couldn't cope with the trauma of her father's betrayal. The children, both sets, will carry this trauma forever. They'll struggle with trust, with relationships, with understanding who their father really was. And Richard, he lives in obscurity now, cut off from both families, his reputation destroyed, his career over. He has nothing and nobody. Was it worth it? 15 years of living a double life? 15 years of lies? Absolutely not. Because the truth always comes out, eventually. And when it does, the damage is catastrophic. The Richard Hartwell case fascinates people because most of us can't imagine living such a massive lie. For 15 years. How exhausting, how terrifying, how impossible it seems. But Richard did it. Thousands of people do it, living double lives, secret families, hidden affairs. And when those secrets are exposed, lives are destroyed. What do you think? Do you feel any sympathy for Richard Hartwell? Do you think Sarah Hartwell got a fair sentence? Was Jessica Monroe partially to blame for not seeing the signs? Comment down below and let us know. And don't forget to tell us what state you're watching from. We love hearing from our American Shadow family all across America. If this case shocked you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime stories that will make you question everything. We post new videos every week. And remember, the truth always comes out, and the consequences can be deadly. I'm American Shadow, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.